EJ Snyder, also known as Ed to some people, joining us now. That'll be very inside.
Right. People will be like, wait a minute, what? Who?
He has many, many names. You know him from Bootleg Football and all of the amazing content that you guys are putting out there. So excited to talk a little ball with you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're all here for, and the reason we all got into this. And this is like the super carnival of the NFL. Everybody's here, and you get to talk to everybody, and every conversation you have, whether it's out to dinner or, in an Uber, we've all had those, or like, oh yeah, what's my team going to do? So it's fantastic. It's a great week.
Feels like a big institutional knowledge kind of week.
Yes.
Like you go here, you talk to a lot of people. There might not be a direct benefit for your specific content in some ways, but you walk away having a better understanding of how the league is working as a whole. What do you think is the main thing that kind of falls into that bucket for you so far this year?
I think shape of the class. As we talk about a draft class, each class, and it's one of my favorite things about the draft, is unique. It's a snapshot. You don't get to carry those picks over to next year. You can't use them last year. You've got to use it for the players you have in front of you. And seeing how everybody, because everybody is here, we're talking about agents and coaches, the players themselves, other media members, how everybody else in their own world, because we all do this in our own offices, when we all come together, what's the overall shape of that class? And do people see it the same way, given their respective role, or do they see it differently? And it kind of gives you an alignment and lets you know where you're an outlier and where you're with the mainstream. And that's useful. I'm not going to say that changes things, but there's definitely surprises for me every year. I'm like, really? You think that guy's going to be available in the 4th? Okay, like I'm not there at all. And you maybe go back to the tape and try and figure that out.
So you mentioned everyone's here. Scouts, agents, the lights are on. The uniformity of the roles and the uniformity of the drills are all the same. What do you think about guys that are now even in the high teens in terms of the consensus big board, Jalen Walker now opting out?
Well, I think getting asked this question a lot, especially this year, and we all know why. But it's not just the combine. I think it comes together at a head at the combine, and it's the most high profile. It's under the bright lights, so people talk about it more. But even through guys not doing their pro days, guys not going to all-star games, this is the entire process, and athletes really taking control of their own destiny in a way that we haven't seen before. And that's going through all sports, and it's landing with football. We're seeing it in college in terms of NIL and the transfer portal. They're very used to having control now, which was not a thing 5 years ago. So when they get into this process naturally and they're with their team and they say, hey, this might not be of benefit to you, or, if there's a risk, let's not do this. Or even comparatively in the class, you could hurt yourself by doing this. We're seeing guys make those decisions. And again, nobody did that forever. If you got invited to the combine, it was the greatest thing, and you went and you did your best. And that was just the expectation. And the expectation has changed.
Top quarterbacks have done this for a while, though. Usually, obviously, top quarterbacks.
Correct.
And that's about it.
Yes. So top 1 or 2 sort of had that luxury, and everybody else is like, well, I better go and compete for my spot. And that was typically the advice they got. And now I think the advice is on a case-by-case basis very, very different. People might say, hey, this could be a good thing for you, or with where you're at right now, I don't think you have a lot to win and you have a lot to lose, so let's balance that out.
Yeah, and my guess is that that'll continue until there are some examples of people clearly hurting in terms of their draft stock because of not being out there.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, it's interesting that you've got guys further down the draft board that are making that call now.
Right. And what I'm thinking of is a guy like Quinn Ewers, who you take it all the way back to high school, one of the highest rated prospects in the history of college football. He seems, particularly given his affinity for deep sky balls like Russell Wilson throws, as a guy who could potentially make some noise in a combine. Most of his issues, it seemed like, were in the red zone last year. And at no point are you in the red zone at the combine, right? Yep. So what do you think about
start that drill?
A guy like Quinn Ewers and his ability to move up?
Well, I think Quinn Ewers is a great case study. As we say, case-by-case basis, this is the kind of guy we're talking about, right? Sky high coming out of high school. You heard about him for a couple of years, which as a high school prospect is very rare. Then you started to see him at passing camps, and you started to see the arm and how different it was. And it was like, oh, consensus top quarterback in the country. He was in that rare air. Came out, obviously, that doesn't always survive the college game, and we've seen him go up and down throughout, and a little bit more down in this recent season than up. A lot of people thinking he was going to take a next step, and when quarterbacks don't do that, even if they sort of stay at the same level or plateau, it feels like a drop because you were expecting a rise and you didn't get it. Quinn Ewers is a guy, I think, to your point, has a really good opportunity to come in here and, I'm not going to say answer questions, but reaffirm what people know. And he's kind of custom built for a lot of these drills. And that's what you're talking about. You're not throwing into coverage. You are throwing to unfamiliar receivers, but he's got a great arm. He's got a quick release. They're going to see all that. And they're going to be like, no, I was right about Ewers, right? Then you go back to the tape, the red zone drills and everything else. That's going to stand as its own thing, but he can come out of this week with a real shine to him, whereas he came into it with maybe a medium status.
How do you balance in your mind trying to project the draft? In like, you have opinions because you're
Sure.
watching tape and you're coming up with your own set of evaluations.
Correct.
And then you're trying to plug them in to a degree about like what the teams will do and how you think that they will see them and how they fit their needs and prioritize need over talent.
Yes.
How do you come, like, what's your calculus look like in trying to figure that out?
That meme with all the mathematical
Totally.
equations floating through people's heads. That's really it. And that's my fascination with the draft and why I'll always be fascinated with the draft, because it's the world's biggest poker game. It has the most variables, and it has a lot of different players who see the game in a different way, and they all have to come together and play on the same table.
Yeah.
And again, it's a snapshot. It's 1 year. You can't pass those choices away. If you don't like the look of this class, but you need a player in that position, you're either getting them through free agency or the draft, and that's it. Those are really the only two sources for players outside of a very few number of cases that statistically aren't significant. So you have to figure out how that works, and then you have to figure out how to balance those resources. Hey, it's a really deep class. We need one of these guys, but this year we can get him in the fourth. Last year we would have had to get him in the second, so maybe we get that other position that's not quite as deep in the second, and all that shifting in times 32. And that is a fascinating mix for me. So one of the things I've been very clear about over the past really 3 years, and I've encouraged other people to, and I think a lot of the draft community has come to, is when you are saying an opinion or when you are putting out a big board or a mock draft or anything else, the thing you have to say is, how did you do this? Is this your ranking?
Right.
Or is this what you think is going to happen?
Yes.
What I would do or what I think is going to happen. And people didn't make that distinction for a long time, or often we were all guilty of this. We would mix it together.
Mm-hmm.
This is a little bit of what I would do, and this is a little bit of what I think this guy might do because of his history. And trying to be clearer about that at the outset, I think, has helped draft content in general be more, I'll say, interchangeable, right? We can have better conversations about that content knowing, no, this is how I rank them. This is what I would do if I was the GM for all 32 teams, or given history, this isn't what I agree with. This isn't necessarily my opinion, but it's very, very likely that this guy is going to pick an offensive lineman because he has 8 out of the last 9 times,
right?
Things like that.
I think that's so interesting that you said that, because there's so much groupthink in
it's very
everything, right? But in NFL media, in draft, so if you're seeing someone's name at the top of a board, it might not even be that you think he's very good. You just think that the team will think that he's good and or be so desperate for the position that you're going to take him. I love that point about needing to clarify the difference, because I think that all the time. And I think people misinterpret it, and it makes people evaluate players differently in their mind if they think everybody else thinks that they're good. Or better.
I'm going to riff off your point, which I think is one of the most interesting and probably least considered things in draft media, which is you need, as me, as a draft analyst, I need to control my eyeballs.
Right.
I need to basically have curtains that come down and say, I am not going to consume that content right now because I haven't watched that guy.
Yeah.
Right? Or I'm not going to look at that big, top 10 list for defensive linemen because I'm only 5 deep. And if I look at that, I can't unsee it.
Yeah.
Right? And even if I respect that evaluator and they have a great track record, maybe even we're friends, right? And I know how they come to their evaluation and I trust it or I don't, I can't unsee it.
Yeah.
So until I've had my first pass at guys, I consume very little draft media. People will say to you all the time, oh, did you see DJ's big board? And I love DJ. Great guy. One of the guys I trust most in the industry. I don't look at that stuff before I am deep enough in my own evaluation to go, what do I think about that compared to what DJ thinks about, which sounds like the most egotistical thing in the world.
No, I think it totally makes sense.
But it's just an occupational hazard.
You need your work to be specifically yours.
Correct.
Otherwise,
Correct.
Like, what's the value?
Indeed.
So let's jump into some of that work. I've devoted today to figuring out the first round edge market. I think Abdul Carter's at the top. Hasn't been a ton of chatter about him. It feels like he's kind of a done deal certified type guy.
Right.
But as an analyst, I look at the fact that there's 6+ first round grades, guys that could go in the first round. It's just hard for me to believe that he can be that separated from guys at 10, at 15, at 16. What are your views on Carter versus the rest of that first round edge class?
It's a great question, and it's a very relevant one because the top end of this draft, without a dominant quarterback prospect, as you said, Lindsay, is going to be more fluid. And therefore, lots more players come into it. And it comes to a point very quickly, doing a Jags hit right after this, right about at the Jags pick at 5, things get real muddy real quick.
Right.
There is no presumptive, well, you're definitely going to pick this guy or this guy. That happens. I mean, even at this point in the calendar, that's often the case down to 5 picks, 6 picks. After about pick 2, you can't really say that. Carter, I think, is safe in the fact that he has a very high floor. Athletically, as a football player, with intelligence, with production, he's not a guy that feels terribly risky. And in a draft with a lot of uncertainty right at the top, a guy like Abdul Carter gets penciled in because of that. Are there other first-round edge talents? Absolutely. Are they on his level for me? They're not. Like, if I have that pick and I'm in the top 5 and I need an edge and he's still on the board, he's absolutely my guy. Now, if I'm going to be able to float back, it happens. Teams trade back, whatever else, and I'm looking and I'm saying, oh, well, maybe I can go back, 4 spots, 5 spots. Then I have a choice between Mike Green and Abdul Carter. But if I miss on Abdul Carter, I feel good enough about Green, I'll do that. And then we start into that trigonometry of how does this all balance, and is the extra pick worth it?
Yep.
Or is Abdul Carter a guy that I think is a blue chip for 10 years with my current organization?
What is the opportunity cost in your mind for teams that are taking quarterbacks in the top 5? Like, how do you weigh that this year?
This year, it's very difficult because there are not guys, I think, across the board that are going to be difference makers for sure. Situation is important, as it always is, but you're looking at guys with a lot more holes or a lot more things to improve upon than
in
guys.
general, are you talking about everybody in this?
I'm talking about
range?
quarterbacks.
Or quarterbacks.
specific,
Okay, got it.
right? And quarterback, as we all know, is it's the leverage position
Right.
in all of sports, but especially in football. And if you don't have one as an NFL team, you're not going anywhere, and everybody knows it. Your fans know it, your coaches know it, your opposition knows it. You have to get the quarterback. And so there's desperation for teams that don't have them. And again, very limited pool. Possibility of a trade, those are very difficult to pull off for top quarterback prospects. Free agency, those musical chairs fill up really quick. There's 3, maybe 4 options that people are going to get excited about. And after that, it's a fill in.
Do you have any names to attach to those 3, maybe 4?
Well, I mean,
Because I don't know if I'm excited about any of the quarterbacks that are free
mean,
agents.
If you're a team that doesn't have one, Sam Darnold looks pretty darn good.
Yes. I
Right?
guess I'm not. Yes. I have him as a tag and trade in my brain as opposed to a free agency. But you're right. Right.
He's available.
You're
Let's
correct.
just say he's available.
My bad.
So he's part of that pool, and he is a unique situation this year. But after that, you're looking, if you need a quarterback and you're not going to be in on that sweepstakes, you're looking at the draft.
Right.
And are you looking at the top of the draft? When you're talking about opportunity cost, if we've seen this multiple times, if you reach for a quarterback, clearly reach for a quarterback, especially in the top 10, because of the payment structure. That's the other thing people don't think about is if you pick in the top 10, it doesn't matter. It's not position specific. You get a certain amount of money,
Right.
and you're right at the top of the scale.
Yeah.
The cost of doing that financially is one thing. The cost of doing that, missing them, having them not work out, you set your franchise back about 3 years, typically 2 to 3 years, because you have to take another swing. You have to pour more resources into it. You've already paid out the contract. You didn't get the production on the field and wins. Like, it is an extreme, when I say the most, high stakes poker game in the world, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at coaches getting fired. You're looking at regime change. You're looking at, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars if you're talking about lost revenue. And it is a huge spot, but you also don't have a choice. You can't just put it off for you. You can't just go, play without a quarterback for you.
Right.
That doesn't work. So what are you going to do? And you might not like either choice. You might be a team, say you're a team from 10 to 15 this year. You need a quarterback, right? You're not going to get one of the top two, probably. You are going to try like crazy to be in on the free agency stuff, but we all know that maybe that free agent has a choice of destination they'd like to go to, and it's not you. You're left holding the bucket. You still need a quarterback. You're at 10. There's already 2 off the board. I don't love any of the choices.
Oh,
I know.
Right.
It twists your guts, right? But you have
It's
to
a
make
pressure
these
cooker
choices.
is what it is.
Right. And then you have people
Over time, too.
and you have people behind you who are like, are they going to do it? Well, I'm going to see if I
Yeah.
can trade up to do it. And then you're trading
Can I
up
wait?
for a quarterback that you probably wouldn't have even taken at your natural spot, but due to scarcity, that's the market. And these are the choices these guys face. It's also why they make the big bucks.
Do you think someone does that for the QB3? Like, you just painted a specific picture there
Yeah.
that I don't even know.
I think with desperation, it's possible. Again, would I recommend it? Do I think it's the best thing given the... No, none of those things. Is it likely to happen in the draft? I don't know about likely, but somebody's going to think about it. Somebody's going to call for sure because they're going to get itchy, right? And maybe their owner whispers in their ear, which is the worst thing ever,
Yep.
right? And goes, now what the hell are you going to do? And they have to decide on the spot, and it's timed, right? They've had all these conversations prior to this. They're starting them this week. Like, hey, if we were going to move up from 10 to 7, or like, what's it going to cost? What's the framework? What would you accept? Have you been taking offers, right? All those conversations are going on this week, which is really the big deal in Indy. So that under that pressure, Kirk can then call and go, hey, that thing we were talking about, can we do it? But, somebody whispers in their ear and they get nervous. We see teams make decisions year after year that are not in the best interest long-term for their football team because got to have it right now.
I like how you're describing these discussions because most people focus in on the high leverage ones that we're talking about, the first round picks. But really where some people make their money, like the Super Bowl Philadelphia Eagles,
Correct.
is doing all of that in the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th rounds. Then all of a sudden they have 2nd and 1st down the line. Who are some guys that you think teams will be willing to trade up for with perhaps the Philadelphia Eagles in the 3rd and 4th round that could be of interest to other teams and some motion could get moving at that point?
Yeah, it's fascinating when a team assembles good depth in the current NFL environment because each NFL team is a new team every year.
Right.
GMs say that, fans don't believe it, but it's true with contracts. We're seeing roughly 55% of contracts or one-year deals or expiring things that basically come off the books every year, and you have to rebuild. So when a team in that environment, like the Eagles, can assemble a strong unit, whether it's offensive line or defensive line in their case, and you have, extra stock sitting around and other teams are looking at it, that's a tremendous competitive advantage for guys like Howie to be able to say, oh, you want to throw a pick? Like, he's probably going to leave next year anyways. We've got 3 guys behind him in the developmental pipeline. If I can flip that pick, and again, you're a little bit desperate, you missed out on the guy you wanted, now you give us a call and say, is he available? I might lose him in a year anyways, as opposed to letting him go now, letting my 3 guys in the development pipeline move up, and getting a pick. That's chess, right? That's not checkers of just fill the square on the board. So it's awesome. And we don't see too many teams that have a surplus at any one position. The Eagles are unique, and they might have a surplus in 3 or 4. Those are high leverage deals, and it's one of the reasons that Howie is Howie and great at his job.
I'm curious, you mentioned earlier about at this time of year kind of having conversations and figuring out where you're an outlier. Where do you feel like you're an outlier right now?
Oh, I'm still figuring it out.
Okay.
And that'll happen even more as the drills happen. You're starting to have those conversations now that everybody's in town over the last 2 days. My question that I asked last night at dinner with a bunch of other draft analysts who I really respect, I just went around the table and I said, who's a player that you just kind of love, not for any particular reason?
Yeah.
Not because they're in a high leverage spot or maybe even a position that you love, but like you watch the tape and you're like, dude, football player, I just love this guy. Give me a name that is already sort of on your board, maybe higher than somebody else's. And it was great to get different answers just around. And some guys, I was
Were there
like,
any
oh,
overlapping?
Yeah, absolutely. There were guys that I was like, yep, I've watched him. Absolutely see what you're saying. Love it. He's on my list too. And then there were guys that were like, nope, this is, here's a 5th round linebacker I really like. And I was like, I haven't watched him yet because I've only watched, 10 or 12. I'm not down to the 5th round. Why do you like him? And maybe it's a school affiliation. Maybe it's, they knew their brother or their age. Everybody's got their own stuff. Or maybe they just popped on the tape and pulled out the popcorn and went, this is why I got into this. This is fun.
Do you have one?
I really like Sean Dolak from Buffalo, speaking of linebackers. He's wearing number 52 at Buffalo, which is a pretty ballsy move, right? You're Khalil Mack now. But he is just a tackle machine. He's extremely aggressive. I think he would be a great fit in a culture like Detroit. They don't necessarily need him, but like imagine Sean Dolak playing for Dan Campbell. I'm like, that would be a terror. No, he's a great guy. He's really fun. He's somebody that a lot of people aren't familiar with yet, but they're gonna be. When they get down to 5th round linebacker tape, if they go that deep, they're gonna watch Sean Dolak for about half a quarter and go, holy crap, the numbers are good. The other thing is he has exceptional hands. Like if he was 2 inches taller, he could play tight end. He had 5 picks this year, and when you go back and look at those, whenever I see, especially an inside linebacker, has 5 picks, you're like, oh, were they just tips? Like, did he just run under?
Yeah.
No. 4 out of the 5 were hands picks where he undercut a route. As a linebacker, I was like, done, check, we're on it. And he had, I think, 150 or 170 tackles or something. Like, he's always around the ball. The old agile, mobile, hostile.
Yeah.
All 3 boxes checked. Love his game.
I want to ask you one more question before we let you go. I know you've got other places that you need to be. Is there something that you have been most wrong about in the last few years? And what do you take away from being wrong in terms of your evaluation moving forward?
It's my favorite thing. I love being wrong.
Yeah.
You learn way more from being wrong than you being right. And you have to be open to that in this business, because if you're not, you're just going to keep being wrong, and you're going to be wrong more because the game moves. And if you stay in the same spot and you don't look at your process, if you don't self-scout as a scout, you're in big trouble. So I love being wrong and going back and saying, why did that happen? I mean, it hurts at the moment, right? You're like, everybody wants to be right.
Yeah.
But why was I wrong? How did I miss? What did I let myself do that I'm not going to let myself do again? Or what was right in front of me that I just dismissed or discounted in a way that, made me miss on this player? So the first one that really shifted me to that was Deion Jones, linebacker, right? Came out and I was like, at that point, I still sort of had a size threshold for linebacker. I was like, he's just too small. He's going to get run over. Comes out his first year with the Atlanta Falcons, has like 125 tackles as a rookie. And I had to go, you probably need to shift your rule.
Yeah.
Like, this guy came to the next level, top competition, and tore it up. He wasn't just good, he was great. And you discounted him based on one thing. Okay, if I see another guy his size, what do I need to look for that could let them have similar success and not just have me go, he's too small?
It's ironic you mentioned that. Playing linebacker at the time that Deion Jones was playing for the Falcons, I crafted my game kind of after him a little bit. So I love that answer, and I love Deion Jones too. So.
Yeah,
Deion Jones and Sam Bruckhouse, same.
No, he's a lot smaller than me, but
That's the
to your
headline.
point, he's a lot smaller. But the side-to-side play, the ability to play in the middle and cover 2, the ability to make plays in multiple different alignments, that's what I loved about him, and that's what I try to pick up.
EJ Snyder, where can people find your work?
Bootleg Football on YouTube is where most of it is. I also do a Bear-specific podcast, also on YouTube, called Bear Era. It's much smaller. We just started, but we're having some fun with that as well. But all the draft-focused content you will see on Bootleg, and we've got extra stuff for our patrons this year. We've got some patron-specific bonus content that is new for us, so check that out as well.
Great talking to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for the time.